Had a good breakfast, lunch, or dinner? I hope you did. Welcome back to part 3. Now, you might be wondering what my... Oh, hang on. I need to update my audio equipment. I have updated my audio equipment. Now, you might be wondering what my theory is, or perhaps you've already guessed. This apparently very silly crack theory of mine on the identity of both the man and unknown Valentine that will probably be stomped into the ground by chapter 4. So, who could these two, who might already be the same regardless, possibly be by my estimation? Any final guesses? Well, I'll tell you. It is my belief that the man and unknown might be Grandpa Semi. Some of you are probably quite confused. A good number of you might not have even heard of this character, and those who have may still be scratching your heads. How about I alleviate some of that with a bit of a lesson on some of Undertale's development history and the like. Grandpa Semi is what can only be assumed to be a major character from Undertale that was cut early to mid in development. And when I say cut, I mean Toby absolutely obliterated any mention of him or hints both within the initial development and the updates. It was far from a Gaster situation in that sense. From what was within the game itself, there were two things. First, and probably more well known, is what appeared to be a fanfare for Grandpa Semi, just named Sound Grandpa Semi in the files, and was both in the demo and the final game, with the melody oddly being of the same leitmotif as Metal Crusher's intro, which I will get back to. It is used in the final game, but is instead given to the Temmie event in her battle, where you offer her Tem Flakes, then refuse to give it to her, which will prompt her to say this. Strange. Its file is also renamed to Grandpa Temmie to remove any trace of the original character. Second, there's Grandpa Semi's phone call slot in the demo, which appears to originally take the place of what's now Alphys' Pizza Call fun event. According to the note left behind here, he literally would have asked for a pizza, but whether or not it's written in character is unknown, not that unknown. Either or none of this and the Temmie bit could be in character for the guy, but the latter, to me, seems more apt. A quirky old guy who's friendly and likes telling jokes sometimes, but really sucks at it. Is there any more foundation to this? In fact, yes, as you'll soon see. We also have Toby's early concept notes for Undertale, which, among things you'd otherwise expect, do have a couple relevant things hidden in them. Most strikingly, when we go to Papyrus's page, we can see that he has a short descriptor of his relations to two other characters, which is partially redacted. A brother named Comic Sans and a blank named Blank. This could potentially be something like a brother or father named Wingdings, or other more modernly applicable stuff like that, but as is probably more reasonable for this point in development, it's likely a grandpa named Semi. This isn't just me putting words in Toby's mouth, or hands. Also in the notes, on Flowey's page here, we can see some bleed through from the other side of the page, namely a name that's just about crystal clear, Grandpa Semi. Just under that, there's a description of what appears to be a cut boss fight against him. Though, due to the need to squint and whatnot, it's difficult to tell what exactly it would have been like. Possibly initially sleeping and incidentally damaging the protagonist. Something goofy along those lines, fitting for a worldly relative of Papyrus and Sans. Oh yeah, that still probably requires more explanation. Okay, so the name Semi appears to be referring to Semi-Seraph, a family of fonts with light serifs. Thus, it's theorized that Semi was the grandfather of Sans and Papyrus, as y'all saw earlier. Perhaps he would have been a father figure to them, as well as maybe something of an arbiter between the brothers. Generally very silly, friendly fellow, but seemingly clumsy and odd. Then there's also the bit about Metal Crusher's leitmotif. Perhaps in the original plans, and this is me speculating here, Grandpa Semi was to be a previous royal scientist, maybe helping Alphys build Mettaton's original body, hence the leitmotif. This is also helped by Papyrus employing Alphys' tile puzzle, which is generated by Mettaton, twice. A further hypothesis of mine is that Semi would have run the snail farm in Waterfall, hence the use of Sans' encounter theme, and potentially being between his family and his place of work, and of course, Mettaton used to live there. But y'all probably see the problem with this, right? The likely reason that Semi was cut was probably because of Gaster's development taking precedent. Once the stretch goal was met, which meant that Deltarune would be restoring development, now firmly in the same series as Undertale. The game, whose very nature was shrouded in darkness, appeared to be the undoing of this low-stakes character. As W.D. Gaster's character grew into what we know now, or at least speculate now, Adapting into the existence of Undertale after first being conceptualized for Deltarune and relaying him to the Skeleton Bros, Toby likely felt that Grandpa Semi was an awkward fourth wheel at best, and a narrative liability at worst. Since he would have been the weakest link, Toby probably removed Semi and was as thorough as possible, as to both make way for the immense, meta, multiverse-spanning character that is Gaster, and the expanded backstory of the brothers, while now avoiding the risk of Semi being lumped in with Gaster in the current canon. Can't have an actual cut character be confused with a thematically cut character. At best, parts of Semi seem to have been absorbed into Gaster during development, perhaps retaining the position as the previous royal scientist, as well as potentially a father figure to the brothers. Hell, maybe Semi had to do with Redacted, who also seems would have shown up in the snail farm. Whether Redacted is what's left of Semi, or an early attempt at making Gaster an Undertale, both entities ended up being relegated to the dark back corners of Undertale files. Broken, unfinished, dummied out, and blocked by dog-check for good measure. Little more than curiosities of Undertale's development, with no bearing on its lore, separate from the meta-narrative that would come to drag them into effective oblivion. And here I am, with the gall to say that Toby might be bringing Semi back. Here's where I will explain myself, or at least attempt to. Let's begin with the big one. Referring to the Chapter 2 traffic jam, where the man plays Honk Song. This melody being entirely comprised of Undertale songs, but most notably is that it has a whole section dedicated to just what's recognizable to most as just Metal Crusher's intro. However, if you've been paying attention, that's also Semi's theme. Furthermore, about Grandpa Semi's fanfare, there is Temmie, who of course appears to have an apparent man-egg of her own, as elaborated in the past, but she also inherits that same self-named fanfare back in Undertale. Moving on to how the unknown Valentine card is written, Papyrus and Gaster capitalize all their letters, so another relative of theirs doing the same works out. Furthermore, with the speaking style and the like of unknown, the uncertainty, misspelling of goodbye, and the verbal friendliness are much akin to that of a humorous old coot, as seen in both languages. From what little information we have on Semi from Undertale's development, him being one such funny old man makes perfect sense. Then there's how this might play into the card being unreadable. The requirement of acute focus to read and interpret something that relates to Semi, his concept notes. Some fans, including myself, have been looking through Toby's old handwritten notes for some more information on the game via bleed-through, which is how we have half of the Grandpa Semi data that we do now, being bits of his scrap boss battle concept and the like. You know, squinting to see the bleed-through on the other side of the page, interpreting it how best you can. Sort of like squinting one's eyes and heart to read a certain letter. If this does become real, it'd be one of the coolest ways Toby has ever, retroactively, alluded to a character, even though only like 5 people know that Grandpa Semi was supposed to be a thing. Grandpa Semi being scrapped could also play into the meta aspect of the man/unknown. This is especially with how the man rooms look like unused, broken, or unfinished rooms in their own right, even being far away from the other rooms in Chapter 1, not unlike a cut character with bits still left, such as Semi or Redacted. Even the annoying dog is there to boot you out of the fake man room, just like in Dog Check. This same dog is also apparently causing the man-composed traffic jam outside of the library, or, causing it, not like the dog being in the cars, of course. The same dog also having a dense history with Sands of Papyrus, especially in Undertale, and supplementary material, mainly annoying the latter. With those numerous gray cars among a confirmed goner, that might not only be another parallel to what may be Semi's possible relative, Gaster, in itself, but also may further suggest that the man himself is a goner. Hey there, it's Sichuan from the future. I just kind of realized something as I was editing this. Alongside Donut Guy, there's of course Snail Guy in the other car, which everyone sees, but I'm just now realizing this goes very well with my snail farm thing from earlier. So, yeah, more Semi stuff there, possibly, or at least Redacted or what have you. So, there you go. That's interesting. Moving on. And let's not forget that the current egg depositing locations relate to Sans, who would be Semi's grandson. Or, even better, or in addition to that, the self-confusion of the letter could be a nod to Semi's development history. As is theorized by many of us, who know about Semi of course. When he was scrapped, aspects of his character and role were repurposed and absorbed into Gaster, from how we can see, even more so with Semi's possible relation to Redacted itself. Semi having a difficult time knowing the difference between himself and the person he wishes to help would be yet another awesome nod to this. I would love that. Truthfully, even though I do still fear what might happen if Toby goes through with cut/scrap content canonization, as things could go wrong, I 100% support at least Semi manifesting into Deltarune. In that sense, it'd be even better for him, more so if also the man and or unknown, to be a goner. He'd not only be like Gaster in genetic relation, but also the character of Semi himself being resurrected from a developmentally doomed state, such a thing or similar appearing to be part of the theming of the confirmed goners, with the whole sullied existence thing. I can just imagine what a boss fight against Semi as the man/unknown could be like. Many bone attacks, rather jovial tone, despite the probable high difficulty, meta trickery, callbacks to the fights against Sans Papyrus, perhaps some reuse of concepts from Semi's original scrapped Undertale boss fight, maybe a Gaster blaster or two, and a perfect excuse to use the blue soul mode outside of a Deltarune fight against Sans and or Papyrus, or Gaster of course. His battle theme employing both the man and Semi's own leitmotif, and like 6/8 time for signature consistency, as well as adding to the whimsy of it all by making it sound like a song of an old sailor. This tone being for the normal route, of course, since the man doesn't appear in the weird route, he likely doesn't take kindly to what we're doing there. If he is to appear in the weird route of the future chapters, I can't say I expect an accompanying altercation with him to be very joyous. I don't know if Semi/unknown/man is to be a regular boss, a secret boss of a specific chapter, or maybe like a secondary secret boss of some sort. But I really want it. Okay, calming down. There are definitely some issues with Semi being unknown or the man. Since he's a skeleton seemingly named after the semi-serif font family, it is somewhat strange that Unknown wouldn't write the letter in such a font if they are him. This may be mitigated by the fact that it is primarily illegible, so the quote-unquote legible version wouldn't default to something that'd be also uniquely stylized, if I'm wording that well enough. Besides, as seen with the other skeletons, Semi would probably also be able to speak or write in DT mono, even if he himself wouldn't have a reason to do so here. Again, citing the legibility conversion. Don't worry, I'm not grasping onto these potential excuses. I know full well how greatly unlikely this whole thing is. Despite my hopes, and unlike the unknown man theory, this Grandpa Semi theory/hypothesis of mine is, at most, just that. An optimistic hypothesis instead of a reliable theory. A crack theory. Semi is a truly cut character. We have no active reason to believe he'd be brought back. If anything, Semi has negative precedence, with all the pains that Toby went through to make sure not even so much as Semi's name remained in Undertale game files by the first update. There's a very good chance that pointing all these possible connections out could just be me jumping at rather alluring shadows. Yes, I think it's possible Grandpa Semi may become canon, and I would be overjoyed if these many pieces of evidence and parallels I've shown actually end up meaning that. Even still, this is as far from a guarantee as something can be without identifiable disproof or official deconfirmation, especially with how messy the inclusion could be in the meta-narrative. But hey, if it somehow comes true, you heard it here first. And if anyone wants to try and make any music for Grandpa Semi as the man, be my guest. I'm going to try doing that myself too, with the help of a friend. This would be the plans I have in the works, quote unquote, from part 1. But I have no experience with making music, much less operating any software for it, hence why I need help. So whether or not I complete that, go nuts if you feel like it. What do y'all think? Will Grandpa Semi come back in some way in Deltarune? Will the man and or unknown at least have references to him? Am I completely off my fucking rocker and undeserving of trust? If nothing else, the angel knows more people need to know about Grandpa Semi, even if he is not to appear in the actual game. Be it as it may, this won't be the last video I make, not by a big shot, especially with chapters 3 and 4 nearing the horizon. Also, I have a Blue Sky account, if you also want to follow me on there. I'd be honored if some of y'all stuck around for any of my future works. See you all around!